In the mid to late 90s, the jump from 2D to 3D gaming was a pretty big deal. Technology had started to become more advanced at this point, and the possibilities when it came to video games had become endless. Through this, we seen the birth of new franchises, while previously established franchises ended up making the transition to 3D, though this came with mixed results. Some were great, like Super Mario 64, Rayman 2, and some were pretty terrible, like Bubsy 3D. And then you had the ones that never saw the light of day, like Jazz Jackrabbit 3D and Turrican 3D. So where does Sonic come into all of this? Well, we all know that about Sonic Extreme and its hellish development cycle. It was meant to be the first true 3D Sonic game, but due to issues with the development team, a la bad planning, poor communication, and shitty business practices, the game never met its deadline of 1996, and eventually met its demise. However, this wouldn't stop Sega from releasing a 3D Sonic game, so Sonic's team then started work on a 3D Sonic RPG for the Sega Saturn. At this point, Sega was already coming out with the Sega Dreamcast, so the project was moved over to the Dreamcast. However, what was left of the Sega Saturn project was repurposed as the Sonic World segment of Sonic Jam. I actually covered this in the previous episode of the Retrospective. With that being said, what did eventually become of this 3D Sonic title? Well, it became what we now know as Sonic Adventure, being released in 1999. Sonic Adventure was quite the game changer for Sonic, mainly for the fact that it was Sonic's first big step into 3D. When it was released, it garnered praise from both critics and fans, and it ended up being one of the best-selling games on the Dreamcast, even getting a sequel in 2001. And for many years, Sonic Adventure, for the most part, would be looked at by the gaming community in a positive manner. Nowadays, though, that's not the case, as a couple of years ago, the discourse around Sonic Adventure and other subsequent 3D Sonic titles started to change, and suffice to say, the outlook on 3D Sonic started to change for the worse. The quality of Sonic Adventure as of recent years has been the topic of debate, with claims of Sonic Adventure being, and I quote, the start of Sonic's downward spiral into mediocrity. A lot of this can be contributed to the opinions of popular gaming-related YouTubers like Aaron Hansen, aka Egoraptor.
Oh geez, what game is this?
It's Sonic Adventure.
Excellent. Is it good?
No.
Okay.
It's fucking, it's horrible.
So, the question remains, is Sonic Adventure a good game, or is it not? Does it stand the test of time? Well, that's what we are here to find out, as today's episode of the Sonic Retrospective will be tackling the Dreamcast classic itself, Sonic Adventure. The controls for Sonic in this game are pretty decent. Basic movement feels natural and responsive, and turning is pretty easy. Sonic's jump, however, feels floaty and a little bit off, making some of the platforming feel a bit awkward. But it's still pretty decent though. One of Sonic's signature moves, the spin dash, returns. In this game though, it's very spammable. Although that's not entirely a bad thing, as it is fun to spam. Although spamming too much might cost a life. Though spin dash jumping is just as good and useful as it was in the classics. Somewhat new to Sonic's arsenal of moves is the homing attack, which allows Sonic to home in on enemies in ball form. Since Sonic is so fast, trying to jump on enemies in a 3D environment would be too hard with speed like this. So this move was basically added in out of necessity. For the most part, it does its job well, although it can be rather sluggish sometimes. There are times where you use the homing attack on a set of airborne badniks to get from one place to the next. This is what is referred to as a homing attack chain, and this is often seen as lazy level design. While I do agree with that sentiment, I don't think it's that bad in this game, mainly because, fortunately, these homing attack chains don't occur often, and when they do, they're mainly a means of taking the higher pathway or taking a shortcut. But in general, the controls are pretty decent, except for the times whenever the collision detection camera decides to be problematic. But I'll talk about that later on. So, why don't we talk about the main feature of Sonic Adventure, the multiple character story arcs. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, you had a choice of playing one of three playable characters who played similar to each other, but they had their own unique abilities that made each one of them stand out. In Sonic Adventure, however, we have 6 playable characters, each having their own different play styles, their own objectives, and their own story campaigns. I know Knuckles had his own campaign in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but it was still somewhat of the same thing as the other ones in that game. Out of the 6 playable characters, we have Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and 2 brand new characters, Big the Cat and Gamma.
I'm making fucking mac and cheese!
I might as well use this as an opportunity to knock the story out of the way. Eggman discovers an entity known as Chaos, an ancient god who is infilled by the rage of his past. Chaos evolves and grows stronger with every Chaos Emerald he consumes, and Eggman wants to use Chaos to destroy Station Square, which is a city where a good chunk of the game takes place, so he can build Robotnik Land. Seeing this as a threat, Sonic and Tails set out to find the rest of the Chaos Emeralds before Eggman can. Meanwhile, Knuckles is out collecting the Master Emerald shards after it was supposedly destroyed by Eggman by releasing Chaos from the Master Emerald. Amy gets thrown into the plot after she comes across a Flicky that's looking for its siblings. So Amy decides to help out this little Flicky, but because this Flicky has the possession of a Chaos Emerald, this Flicky and Amy are a target of Eggman, so Amy and the Flicky get captured by one of Eggman's badniks named Zero. No, not that Zero. Not that Zero either. You wish. No, it's this Zero. While in captivity, Amy is approached by E102 Gamma, who is trying to take the Flicky from Amy. But Amy and the Flicky manage to convince Gamma to let them go. Amy befriends Gamma. This exposure to friendship created a change of heart for Gamma, to which Gamma realizes the errors of his ways. To rectify them, he rejects Eggman and sets out to search for his robotic brother and to free them from their mortal pains by hunting down and destroying each one of them, releasing the little animals inside. And there's also Big. He just wants Froggy back. There are also little segments in each character's story where they are transported to the grounds of the Echidnas tribe at a certain point in the past. These scenes are basically foreshadowing. That's basically my summary of the plot. Sonic Adventure's story is alright for what it's worth, but it's not without some issues. Some of the writing can be pretty dumb at times.
Yeah! This is happening!
While it is cool to see the story from differing perspectives of multiple different characters, it does lead to a lot of repeat cutscenes, which in of itself is bad enough. But in the Dreamcast original, you can't skip cutscenes, meaning you're going to be forced to sit through certain cutscenes over and over again. The animation of the cutscenes do not hold up well at all, and certain things just don't overall add up. With all the negatives of the story aside, there are things to like about the story. The foreshadowing is done pretty well, and there is a lot of build-up, although the payoff isn't that effective considering how the game basically shows what happens in the end within the opening cinematic. But that's not too bad considering how it at least looks cool in the intro. There are times when the plot decides to take a dark turn, with certain things like the Chows getting murdered, Chaos' genocide of the Knuckles clan, Station Square getting destroyed near the end, and of course I can't forget the darkest and edgy of them all, Big the Cat. Considering how this game is usually lighthearted, these more darker elements make Adventure's plot a bit more engaging. In general, they're handled very well, even with the shitty animation quality of the Adventure's cutscenes. It's a story that can be rather engaging at times. The characters are done very well, and some of the character development is pretty strong. Sonic is pretty cool as always, though some of his lines are pretty cheesy, but that's to be expected. I really don't have much to say about him. Knuckles, despite his gullibleness, is still a very chill and vibe character, overall making him very likable. Amy is alright. Tails, however, has some really good character development. So do the other characters, but I want to mention Tails specifically. He starts off being reliant on Sonic, but then there comes a point where they're both separated from each other to which Tails has to take matters into his own hands. So his development is based around becoming more independent, and as a result, his character and adventure is very endearing.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I can do this!
But when it comes to character development, I think Gamma steals the show. I've sort of already explained the story, and I kinda don't want to repeat myself about it. From his beginning to his change of morality and to his eventual demise, Gamma's campaign is very engaging when it comes to story. His campaign is the stronger end of this regard. Gamma is one of the best developed characters in the series. Well, one of the best. Oh, and, there's also Big the Cat. I really like Eggman's characterization in this game. I like how they balanced his more wacky comical side with his more intimidating and demented side. I like how menacing he can get, and Dean Bristow's performance as him is pretty great.
Fool, away, before I make mincemeat out of you.
Chaos is a pretty cool villain. I like how he's this incomplete water god that needs the consumption of the Chaos Emeralds in order to reach his perfect form. Not the most original idea, but it is an alright take on it. And despite having no dialogue, he does have a bit of character to him, and they do build him up really well. I like Tikal. Her character design is nice, and she is overall important to the story. Overall, Sonic Adventure has an okay story. It has its flaws, but it also has its highlights. Not to mention, Sonic Adventure did add a lot of new lore and mythos to the Sonic franchise, like the Knuckles clan, the Chow, and Chaos. Alright, so with my analysis about the story aside, let's actually talk about the multiple playstyles. I'm just gonna get right to the point and say that the character formula, the identity that comprises what most of Sonic Adventure is fundamentally flawed. This is for many reasons. The first reason being repetition. With 11 zones and 6 overall campaigns, you're going to be revisiting the same locations throughout the game's duration. Though this really isn't an issue considering that going through one stage as one particular character is different from going to the same location as another. For example, going through Red Mountain as Knuckles is a different experience compared to going through Red Mountain as Sonic. With Knuckles, you can explore certain parts of the first section that Sonic can't, whereas Sonic has a second section of the stage that he can go through that Knuckles can't. This is just one of many examples I could use. So, the issue of repeat stages really isn't even an issue. What is an issue, though, are that certain cutscenes and boss fights have to be repeated, but that's about it. The second problem is compensation. With a gameplay formula like this, the stages have to be tailored to multiple different characters. As a result, some of the different playstyles, and to some extent the level design, are held back and possibly even underdeveloped. Thankfully, this isn't much of an issue, as most of the time the level design manages to work its way around multiple different playstyles without having to hold itself back, but there are times where this does show itself as an issue, as sometimes the level design has to compensate for certain playstyles by dumbing itself down or through the means of a gimmick. A good example of this is Casinopolis. You can tell they made the stage specifically for Knuckles, but they just had to somehow shove Sonic in there. So you're given a dumb gimmick that requires you to collect a certain amount of rings that you can cash in to create a pile of coins that acts as a pathway to the goal. Fortunately, we did get 2 pretty cool pinball minigames, one of them even being based off Knights.
Don't take my lunch money.
And then now they're
Don't
shaking
take
out
my lunch money. My dad gave me that lunch money. My dad.
And the third and final flaw is quality consistency. Now, it's no secret that you would want your game to be consistently good throughout its duration. When it comes to a platform like Sonic Adventure that has multiple different playstyles, this could be a problem. What if some of them are bad? What if all of them are bad? Granted, you can still have a game with one consistent playstyle. and it can still be a bad game, but at least you're dealing with one consistent playstyle and not juggling over multiple bad playstyles. For many other people, this is often a point of criticism with not just Adventure, but almost every 3D Sonic game of the 2000s. This hate extends even beyond the playstyles to just Sonic's friends in general. A lot of the hate towards the side characters in the Sonic series is honestly ridiculous. With all that said, let's talk about each individual playstyle to see if any of them are good.